Well, I've spoken about how we've entered a strange period where truth-telling seems to be devoid of any actual truth. We're currently seeing this play out in the early stages of the voice debate, and mark my words, it's only going to get worse. But we also learnt this week that Anthony Albanese plans to push truth-telling as part of the national curriculum, presumably a way to further indoctrinate kids with a disdain for their own country. Joining me now to discuss this and some of the other big political news is the Shadow Education Minister Alan Tudge. Alan, it's great to see you. How are you?
G'day, Rowan. Good to be in the program.
Thanks for coming along, Alan. Now, we know history lessons in school already skew to the left. You and I have discussed that many times in the past, and you certainly, when you were in a position to do so, fought tooth and nail to try and alter that. But we know it does skew to the leftist view of our past. Do you actually think we need more truth-telling?
Well, in some respects, that's all I was ever calling for, was for history to be taught accurately. And the story of Australia, Rowan, is a remarkable one, and by and large an incredibly positive one, which we should be proud of. I mean, there's a reason that millions of people want to come here, and it's not because we're this terrible, shocking country that the left would like to portray us as. Now, having said that, we've also got some parts of our history which aren't nice. They are difficult to deal with, but we should also be teaching those aspects of our history. And I also want to see a proper teaching of the full Indigenous history going back 50 or 60,000 years, because it's actually a fascinating history in and of itself too, in terms of what occurred, how they adapted to climate change, which was quite significant at the time, the technology used, the medicines used, but also some of the things which today we would probably be quite confronted by. Including, as Jeffrey Blaney points out, sometimes infanticide being practiced.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it goes without saying that there would have been some horrific things as well as some wonderful things that happened in societies before colonial settlement. That goes without saying. But there is a certain, it disturbs me, there is I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there is a moral kind of position that the Prime Minister holds. I know it's not their main focus on life, but the Prime Minister does carry an awful lot of moral weight. And when the Prime Minister of the day is saying, right, let's get fair dinkum about massacres, you're suddenly left with the impression, well, this is a nation, a horrific nation that massacred Indigenous people left, right and centre, whereas we know full well, or this is my contention, at least I'd love to hear your point of view on it, were it not for the British landing here, had it been any other European empire, had it been an Islamic empire, had it been a conquering body from wherever else other than pretty much the British Empire, the lot of Indigenous Australians would have been much bleaker. And we need to recognise and celebrate that fact if we're also going to be looking at the crimes that were committed post-colonial settlement.
Well, I think that's fair and accurate that the British colonisers of land, the settlers of new lands, were amongst the most enlightened that had been, and that typically those countries who were settled by or colonised by the British have done particularly well. I mean, Governor Phillip, who was our first governor when he came to Australia, I mean, he actually made an edict that said that no Aboriginal person should be harmed, and if they were deliberately harmed, then the white settlers would face consequences of that. And there's evidence to suggest that some white people were hanged because they had deliberately murdered Aboriginal people. Having said all that, of course, there were some shocking things which occurred against Aboriginal people. There's no question about that. But equally, there was a lot of warfare between tribes as well at times, Rowan, and that is part of ancient history, but also relatively modern history between Aboriginal tribes as well, and that's been well documented in places like Jeffrey Blaney's History of Australian People, which is an excellent book. So that's what I mean in terms of my hope is that we have this richer discussion about our full history, the good and the bad, rather than this leftist
Absolutely.
view that nothing ever bad happened before 1788 and nothing ever good happened since. I think it's a mixed bag overall. Up until 1788, overall it's been a remarkable story of Australia since. But of course, with some terrible things which have occurred, particularly to Aboriginal people.
And as I say, we are one of the most successful melting pots, if not the most successful melting pot, compared to any other enterprise, if you like. Absolutely. No, carry on.
My view, Rowan, on that is that we are the most tolerant, wealthy, free, successful multicultural country or society on earth in all of human history. Like, there's no other society ever in all of human history which is as free, wealthy, egalitarian, and respectful and tolerant as Australia is today. It doesn't mean we're perfect, but I challenge anyone to find a society in all of human history that is better on those dimensions than Australia is today. And that's a reason to celebrate, but it's also a reason to deeply understand what is it that makes us this incredible country. And that's what we want to impart onto our children so that they defend those attributes as much as our previous generations did.
Absolutely, and I also think we should be, it's another conversation altogether, but I do think we should be rewarding and focusing and looking at those Indigenous Australians, the Lionel Roses and many others who made such an amazing contribution to this nation and saw themselves as Australians first and foremost.
Rowan, you know what, I went to the dinner to celebrate Neville Bonner's 50th anniversary of being the first Indigenous person in the federal parliament. That just occurred this week. Magnificent evening. But, you know, how many people know the name Neville Bonner? I reckon remarkably few, yet he should be a household name, a remarkable figure. And he was pre-selected by the Liberal Party in 1971, I believe, 1971, 1972. Incredible period for the Liberal Party from Queensland to pre-select this Aboriginal man at the time to be their representative in the Senate. That itself is a remarkable story. But Neville Bonner, we should know him, Lionel Roses, so many other individuals that we should celebrate, acknowledge, and teach as part of Australia's fabric and as part of Australia's history.
Fantastic. Alan Tudge, always great to chat to you, and thanks so much for coming on the show this evening, and we'll chat again soon. Thank you.